I've had more time to think about the ending for Jujutsu Kaisen, and I've come to realize it was actually really good. It's something you'll never hear me say. Listen, I love Jujutsu Kaisen, and a lot of us had the exact same concerns that this ending was going to be rushed, and it was. In every single way, it was. Now, I'm seeing a lot of people defend the chapter because we only got 6 pages, so people are thinking that the rest of the pages are going to make the chapter better, and 100% I understand that perspective. It is possible that the 10 to 14 pages that we did not get yet could change things, but I see that as a highly unlikely possibility. This was just simply not good. There were just so many things that went so completely unanswered. And I'm not even talking about world building things or things that fans have been wanting for a while. What I mean by that are fans who are saying they want more backstory in the clans, want more backstory on High and Era Sukuna, or just the High and Era in general, or even further elaboration on Megumi's potential or him as a character since he didn't really grow that much, and same thing for Nobita. Things like repercussions to what's going to happen that Maki destroyed the Zenin clan. All of these things that we definitely need answered. But instead, he blueballed us even further by introducing other plot points that just didn't get answered at the very last second. Like, was that Geto or was that Kenjaku that was walking with Takaba? Probably not Kenjaku because he's evil and there's no reason he would just be walking around with Takaba. But why would he draw a character that so obviously is Geto's body, but then cover the face with a panel? Or rather with a speech bubble, but regardless is intentionally being vague and showing us that there's some possibility here, but then doesn't elaborate further on it. And then even brings up the point of Tengen and Sukuna using Sukuna's remains to hold up the barriers for Jujutsu society. And remember, these barriers are integral to their society in keeping things safe and keeping the general public away from Jujutsu society and also protecting them. Introduced that plot point super last minute too, and then just disregarded it. And I'm not even mad that Gojo didn't come back because even though a lot of us had hopes for it, it was still a high possibility he wasn't going to. But the fact that they didn't really show anybody mourning Gojo except possibly Yuji in a flashback, but not him after he actually passed away. And for all the people who are going to overanalyze, I understand that this is what Gojo wants. He wants to be forgotten because he's no longer needed, and that's totally fine. But that specific line of him wanting to be forgotten, that part was just introduced in this last chapter. The theme of wanting his students to surpass him, that's always been a thing, so that part is totally fine. But having this whole I want to be forgotten because I'm no longer needed thing is new. So he has all these students who he rescued and changed their lives, and we don't get a single panel of them mourning him. And some people are confused, saying they showed that with Megumi and Angel, but no, they didn't. That was Megumi's sister. That wasn't Gojo. So realistically, it just really seemed like a giant big tease. Not even just the one-eye theory and all the one-eye drawings and things of that nature. Because in that regard, it was pretty obvious at this point that Aokatami was listening to his fandom and was just kind of trolling them, making them think that Gojo was going to come back. It's not even that portion. It's the fact that it seemed like Gojo was really just used more as a way to keep people interested than as an actual character now. Because he knew that a lot of us wanted him to come back, so we even had him momentarily come back, but it was Yuta taking over his body. Which, in hindsight, accomplished really nothing. Sure, he clashed domain expansions with Sukuna and was able to save Yuji and Todo, but that could have just been a point where Nobita came back instead, and you would have had the exact same result. If anything, that might have been better because then Todo wouldn't have been distracted by Yuta falling down in Gojo's body and having his Boogie Woogie destroyed. And Nobita coming in last minute like that would have still led to big damage with Soul Resonance, and Yuji and Todo could have continued to jump Sukuna with Boogie Woogie, therefore defeating him that way. Which, in that regard, I really don't have any issues with how Sukuna went out because, in my opinion, it was a long battle anyway, and it usually ends in one hit, so it just kind of fit. But I do understand that some people still had issues with that. And then this big cliffhanger to end on a Sukuna finger inside of a box. That just seemed like such a slap in the face because 1, there is no sequel that we know of, and 2, it's such an open-ended ending that wasn't really necessary. It's fine to have an open-ended ending, but you need to tie up all of your loose ends first before you just open up something new. I just said open a ton of times. And this last random cursed user that they had for their final mission, what was the point of that? I feel like if the point was to show that they've all changed as characters, you could have done that in a different way rather than ending the last couple chapters on completely unnecessary cliffhangers. And I do say unnecessary because they were being ominous about his cursed energy and the fact that it's low and that there's no ill intent. And then in the previous chapter, he also ends it pretty ominously saying, we need to save Yuta. Because we knew that Yuta was supposedly going to be trapped in Gojo's body, so it was like this big thing, oh my god, let's save Yuta. And it turns out it's just save Yuta from being yelled at by Maki. It really seems like the last 3 to 4 chapters were to mess with us more than anything. It's like there was no soul in the chapters left. Now again, I don't know what the reason for this is. I did make a video about the fact that this possibly isn't even all of Akutami's fault. Due to their alleged super strict deadlines, he would still have to end Jujutsu Kaisen whenever they gave him the deadline for. And him being sick and missing out on 4 to 5 chapters consistently could have really put a damper on where he wanted to go with the story, so he had to wrap it up as quickly as possible. Not only that, but whenever he got sick, even his editorial staff had to say that the sickness was worse than they thought, which is why he was taking such a long break. So it is very possible that he's also just sicker than a lot of us thought, and he needed to do this and end it quickly because of his own health. And if all of that is true, it would be undeniably unfortunate, but that doesn't mean it's free of criticism, and people need to realize that. Literally all of that can be true, and that won't change my mind on the fact that I think the ending and the last 3 to 4 chapters were incredibly lackluster. And I honestly don't see 10 to 14 pages of the final chapter, even though we know how it ends, really changing a lot of my perspective on that. Because realistically, what could they really add in those 10 to 14 pages? Maybe just more wrap-ups of what's going on with Yuta and Maki, Hikari, and other characters, but nothing that would wrap up loose ends and all of these new plot points that he just randomly threw into it and then left alone. Now, as a whole, I still thoroughly enjoyed Jujutsu Kaisen. I would still give this manga a pretty solid rating. Previously, it was probably an 8.5, but endings are big for me, so now this drops down to maybe a 7.5 or an 8. I think that most of us can agree that the peak of Jujutsu Kaisen was the Shibuya incident. Even though that was the arc where our glorious king was sealed away for basically a majority of the manga, everything in that arc was executed perfectly. The themes were played out amazingly, and I feel like the characters and their ideals and goals were fleshed out a lot better. But once we started to introduce more and more characters and tried to make them fit in with the rest of the cast, it started to fall apart. Especially all the unnecessary plot points that we added in, like Kenjaku talking to the other countries and actually bringing in their armies for the Culling Games, and then just kind of dropping that plot point rather quickly. And while Shibuya was the peak of it, I still don't think the Culling Games was as bad as people think. Don't get me wrong, there were issues with it, but a lot of it and a lot of the battles for me did make a lot of sense for the story. It wasn't just all flash. Especially this one, especially Maki taking out the Zenin clan. You can't tell me that if you read Jujutsu Kaisen, this wasn't a top 5, top 10 moment for you. And when it gets animated in season 3, it's going to be absolutely amazing. But realistically, past that, this was the best part of Shinjuku Showdown. After Gojo lost, the manga really did kind of taper off further. And it wasn't just the regular decline that it had from Shibuya, it was a jump off of a cliff. Don't get me wrong, there were moments, incredibly hype moments, but nothing ever reached the level again that Gojo and Sukuna had to actually set. And like I said, after that, Gojo really just kind of became a character to push and keep people's interest. That was kind of it. I know it's a long video, but I really just want to get all of my thoughts out about the ending of Jujutsu Kaisen because I've been covering this manga for almost 2 years now. And I did want to say thank you all so much for your support. Thank you for the 2 years, the great following, and we are going to move on to other mangas like we always have. Now, for those who are genuinely wondering why I haven't covered other mangas, I guarantee you probably haven't interacted with my videos covering other mangas. That's not a bad thing, I'm just saying that's how the For You page works. If you're not liking my videos that aren't JJK related, you're not going to get my videos that aren't JJK related. But yes, for those wondering, I'm not just going to stop making content. We'll still be covering multiple other mangas. Boruto, Sakamoto Days, Kaiju Number 8, Dan to Dan, One Piece, etc. So if you are a fan of my content, I do hope that you stick around. However, if you were here for Jujutsu Kaisen and only Jujutsu Kaisen, I would totally understand too. But I'm going to bring the same energy and analysis that I've always had for JJK, and I'm going to do it for the same mangas that I've been covering ever since JJK released. Because again, it wasn't the only manga I was ever covering. And don't worry, Naruto, Dragon Ball, multiple other animes have been over for a while, and you still have people making videos on those. So trust me, there'll still be JJK content to go around, and still more analyses to come. But regardless, this was an insanely fun ride, even if the ending was lackluster, and I appreciate all of you guys for all of your support.